Give your eyes the best and call Dr. Ming Wang at 321-8881 or visit us on the web at drmingwang.com.
Thousands of people in New York in the midst of a huge and crushing blackout, heading for the shoreline and ferry boats home in a picture evocative of a much darker day in this city's history. The difference, this is what officials are saying, is the result of natural causes. The tripping of power systems for hundreds of miles in several big cities today, and the interior of those cities has now tripped into darkness this evening.
From NBC News World Headquarters in New York, this is NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw. Substituting tonight, Brian Williams.
It is only thanks to emergency generators and a whole lot of scrambling here that we are able to say this Thursday night, good evening from our NBC News headquarters in Midtown Manhattan, where we are in the midst of what appears to be a colossal and history-making blackout. Not just this city, but to massive points north and west, as far west as Cleveland, Ohio, and as far north as the Canadian cities of Ottawa and Toronto. The city of Detroit affected. Their airport, the first major metropolitan air center to shut down. Akron, Ohio. New York's capital city of Albany, on west to Syracuse. As far south as some of the residential sections of the state of New Jersey. And certainly all of this city and outlying boroughs, and that means thousands of subway riders in the middle of dark tunnels, people stuck in elevators, trapped across this city in ways they haven't been since the first colossal blackout of the modern age in 1965. We should say early and often here in this broadcast tonight that officials from state, local, and federal agencies are saying this is not the result of any kind of terroristic act. Rather, what they prefer to call a natural cause, a power system that failed and took a whole lot of others with it. The street scene in 6th Avenue in Midtown Manhattan, right outside our headquarters. No traffic lights, 6th Avenue is left to become a pedestrian mall. Those commuters wanting to get home are crowding to the shoreline if the Hudson River is their route. Otherwise, a whole lot of hotel and motel reservations in the New York metropolitan area tonight, and all those areas affected. A look at what has happened to this massive area today. Here is NBC's Lisa Myers.
Brian, the massive power outage hit New York City shortly after 4 o'clock this afternoon and encompassed parts of at least 6 states and Canada, impacting tens of millions of people. This was the scene in New York City. After the power went out, thousands of people simply decided to start walking. With traffic lights out, some pedestrians directed traffic. Those on the ground reported frustration but no panic. In fact, some New Yorkers treated the inconvenience with good humor. The most immediate concern was for thousands believed to be stranded underground in the dark in the New York subway system or in elevators in skyscrapers. New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg said the city has remained calm, and so far there are no reports of injuries.
The police are saying that the evacuation procedures are working. People are calm, and that they are getting out.
Reports so far indicate the power outage hit the cities of New York, Albany, and Syracuse, Detroit, Cleveland, Akron, Toledo, Hartford, Connecticut, as well as the Canadian cities of Toronto, Ottawa, and Montreal.
There is no evidence of any terrorism whatsoever. For some reason or other, there was a power failure in northern New York or southern Canada. That cascaded down through the system and affected the power grid as far east as Connecticut, as far south as New Jersey, and as far west as Ohio.
Power officials say they believe the outage was caused by the overload and subsequent failure of the Niagara-Mohawk power grid. The grid affects 84,000 miles of power lines. A short time ago, Mayor Bloomberg said the power is beginning to come back on, but that it will take a while. perhaps many hours, Brian.
Lisa Myers in Washington. Thanks to Rahima Ellis, who is with us by telephone from Midtown Manhattan, where reporters all during the day have given us eyewitness accounts pretty much along the lines of Lisa Myers' report. No evident panic, a lot of people helping each other, as has always been the case when New York has been hobbled by a crisis like this. Yes, there were early fears that this was part of the new reality we were all living with and living under since September 11th. But once New Yorkers heard via their subway motorman, their bus driver, or the person in their building urging them to withdraw quickly but safely, they were going on about their business this afternoon, and for some it meant a brisk walk. Others, as you've seen, have decided to pause alongside a fountain in Midtown Manhattan. Rahima Ellis, Ashley Banfield is the next correspondent we will go to as we endeavor to cover this our level best. She is at the now familiar plaza outside here at Rockefeller Plaza. Ashley, how are things out there?
Brian, it's not often that we come to you by a cell phone, but there have been so many glitches in communication today. You see everybody walking down the streets, Times Square, Midtown Manhattan, everywhere, trying to make phone calls. It took us over an hour just to get one signal through. Buildings were evacuated, so clearly there were hundreds and hundreds of people on the streets. Sidewalks spilled over into the roadways. Traffic police were trying to clear people off the roads so that ambulances and cars and police cars could get through. We also know that ATM machines aren't working throughout New York, and we learned a story from two men who said they were planning to walk all the way to LaGuardia Airport because they'd heard that ATMs work at LaGuardia. We also know that there are people streaming out of Manhattan, walking across the bridges, of course, an image that was reminiscent of 9/11. But for the most part, Brian, people are really taking this in stride. We do not see anything like the panic we saw in 9/11. Most people just sort of annoyed and frustrated. Most of the shops have been closed down, especially all throughout Times Square. We spoke with one manager of an electronics and camera store who said he was very concerned about looting, brought down the steel shutter over the front of his windows. We spoke with a McDonald's manager, actually a regional operations manager, who said they were shutting the doors and staying inside, watching outside to make sure people didn't break the windows to come in. Also, Broadway shows, all canceled, lights in Times Square, all out. So lines of tourists were outside of the Broadway shows being told there'll be no show tonight. Most people milling about wondering what to do.
We've apparently done a good job at keeping for a while communications with Ashley Banfield from just below our level in this building. But with the power out, we are doing our level best to get these reports from our correspondents in New York. To the West Coast we go, and correspondent George Lewis standing by in our NBC News Los Angeles bureau. George, the view from there tonight.
Yeah, Brian, we feel your pain. You know, we've had power blackouts here in the West Coast a couple of years ago, caused primarily by shortages of power and some energy companies manipulating the market. Today's outage in the East appears to have been caused by equipment failures spreading throughout major portions of the Eastern power grid. If one generator goes out, the others pick up the slack, at least in theory. There are three major grids in this country, in the East, in the West, and a separate one that serves Texas. And while they've been generally dependable, they sometimes have an Achilles heel. A failure in one place can trip circuit breakers in other locations, creating a domino effect as circuit after circuit goes offline. That's what happened in previous New York City blackouts. Officials said they'd put safeguards in place so that it wouldn't happen again, but it did. Here in California, officials who run this state's power grid were asked if it could happen here. Fred Fletcher of Burbank, California's city-owned power company.
Outage probably occurred on one or two transmission lines that caused others then to subsequently fail.
And the problem is, he says, that no matter how high-tech you go, how many electronic safeguards you put in, how many computers go online, it can still happen when you have high heat and heavy demands on the grid, especially in more than one place. If the grid is near maximum in, say, New York City and Cleveland or Detroit, if there are failures in multiple points, it can cause everything to go offline. Now, the power failures here in California a few years ago have been somewhat alleviated by the fact that we've been building more power plants out west. The power outages have actually been a factor in the current recall drive against California Governor Gray Davis. They happened on his watch. He underwent a crash program of building new power plants now. The power grid here seems to be in better shape. Davis is not in politically good shape, but his problems were man-made. The problems back east may be just mechanical. Brian?
George Lewis in our Los Angeles bureau as we take it back to New York here, where like other office buildings throughout the city, the temperature rapidly rising now as we had a 90-degree plus summer hot August day and now no air circulating. Everyone is in the same boat. Those offices with any lights on or power at all are running off emergency generators. They have been ordered to be emptied of employees, and that now familiar shot across the Hudson River as we approach the sunset hours here in New York. If that ferry appears to be moving at warp speed in the foreground, it is. All of the cross Hudson River ferries are packing as many people as they can and traversing the river as quickly as they can. There is the street scene outside the familiar Today Show studios on the plaza in New York. A word here about the scope of what we are covering tonight. This is a blackout of massive and historic terms. From Ottawa, Canada, far to the north, west to Detroit, where the Detroit Metro Airport shut down early on in this, while other airports were still open at pilot's discretion. Then came word that we had lost power in Cleveland, Ohio. A lot of the state of New Jersey is completely down, as is the state of Connecticut. New York's capital of Albany went out early as well with the failure of the major system. And of course, the entire island of Manhattan, all the outlying boroughs, that is. A lot of the streets and highways in New York have become de facto pedestrian malls. This will get very dicey when night falls in this city with no street lights or traffic lights. A lot of people, especially unfamiliar with New York. This is the height of the summer tourist season, and quite a welcome they're receiving from the city of New York. To repeat, that is the Weehawken Ferry across the Hudson to New Jersey. 20,000 people left for that ferry on foot and arrived there to learn that they were all going to divide up among two boats running today. One major ferry line is not using the Hudson River. To our Washington bureau we go, and NBC News Justice correspondent Pete Williams. Pete, early on, you were among the first to reassure us what you were hearing from federal officials, that this is what folks in the power business call natural causes and not what everyone was concerned about early.
Exactly right, and the Department of Homeland Security was literally checking in the dark to see if that was the case, but they say again tonight there is no indication that terrorism was in any way involved in this massive blackout, and that's the consensus, too, of the FBI and other law enforcement agencies.
The Federal Aviation Administration grounded all planes waiting for takeoff at the three main New York area airports, LaGuardia, JFK, and Newark. Airports in Cleveland and in Canada at Ottawa and Toronto were also added to that list. Planes in the air had the option of landing at those airports, but planes on the ground at other airports scheduled to go to those cities could not take off. Homeland Security officials say they have no idea when they'll know the exact cause of the power blackout. Tracing the point of failure involves sending signals over power lines bit by bit and then dispatching crews to check for problems.
While officials are relieved that there is no indication of terrorism, they are concerned at how widespread this failure went and how quickly it spread, despite systems that were intended to prevent such a cascading outage. One official says tonight this does expose a potential vulnerability, Brian.
And Pete, there are tapes of 1965, that fateful night in the city of New York. Then President Lyndon Johnson calling his aide at the White House saying, "Don't tell me that this all went out without some sort of sabotage." He didn't believe it. Here we are looking at the same system failing and then some with all the advances society has made in intervening years. Think of how much of our lives run off electricity. Does this say anything about what's supposed to be the fail-safes along the line?
Yes, it says that as these systems get more complex, they also develop more vulnerabilities. One of them is to the extent that power companies depend on the internet. That's a concern. There have been at least 2 committees appointed by the federal government to look at what is dryly called the nation's infrastructure. And this is something they come back to over and over and over again, at how a relatively simple event can quickly spread and affect so many people. And it's another reminder, they're saying.
Pete, as people were scurrying through lobbies and streets here in New York today, there was a period of several minutes when what we did not know far outweighed what we did. How does the federal government and its vast and many tentacles reach out to find out where the problem is, how far it extends, and who knows what?
Well, first of all, we have a Department of Homeland Security now that we didn't the last time it happened, and they've been in touch with all the city mayors and governors affected, asking if they want any help, and we're told tonight there haven't been any requests. No one's asked for the National Guard or anything like that. One question is, how do they screen airplanes for now? Do they let people go into the secure areas if they can hand-wand them, or do they hold everybody back because they can't X-ray bags? That's something Homeland has to decide. The Ambassador Bridge that goes from Detroit into Canada is open, we're told, with backup power. So it's been largely a matter of working the telephones to find out what cities want, what they need, and right now they're saying to the federal government, hang tight, we really don't need anything right now.
Pete Williams in our Washington Bureau will be coming back to you, I'm sure, throughout the evening as we have all afternoon long. Pete, for now, thanks. Rahima Ellis is not far from the 59th Street Bridge in Manhattan, I am told, and she can give us some perspective of life on the streets of New York this hot summer evening with no power. Rahima, good evening to you.
Good evening, Brian. Rush hour in New York is famous for gridlock, but tonight it has a virtual standstill. I want to pan the camera over a little bit so you can see what's happening in the street. If you would move over just a little bit, folks, people are literally walking out of the city of New York today if they can. They are not just on the sidewalks, but in the middle of the street. It is locking up the traffic unbelievably. The cars are everywhere. All is choked down in this city. It's been an incredible experience here from when the lights went out early on. That meant the traffic lights went out. Early on, when I walked about 3/4 of a mile away from Rockefeller Center, what I saw was people being incredibly courteous to one another. About 10 or 12 cars would pass down the street and they would stop and then allow the cars to pass in the opposite direction. People could hardly believe what was happening, but one thing that happened was there was no panic in the street. One of the reasons, I believe, is because many people were able to tune into radios, transistor radios, or to car radios, and they heard that what was happening here was a power outage. That relieved them tremendously from any sort of fear that there might be some sort of a terrorist threat. Not that, but a power outage, and so they were extremely courteous. People were also prepared. One woman I talked to, I asked how did she get out of one of the high-rise buildings. She said she had a flashlight. It's part of her emergency kit that she carries to work with her and everywhere she goes in New York City, because she was here on September 11th and she is never without it. Other people trying to get home. I saw a man, he had written a sign of Westchester, trying to get someone on the street just to pick him up and take him to the county north of New York City. I think he might have gotten a ride because people were being incredibly courteous. The police tell me at Precinct House 17, a detective told me that when the lights went out, they got flooded with phone calls, primarily people saying that they were stuck in elevators. So what they did was they immediately mobilized people and the fire departments to those various high-rise buildings. And they mobilized their officers to some key intersections to try and control the traffic. In addition, they said they sent officers to vulnerable spots, to the United Nations, to Wall Street, to the Empire State Building, to bridges. Because at first, they didn't know exactly what was going on, and they wanted to try and make certain they were at the key vulnerable spots in the city. But once again, Brian, there are hundreds of thousands of people making a mass exodus out of the city tonight. Many of them are on foot. It is all happening in as orderly a way as it can when you have traffic that is clogged like it is here today. A lot of it is at a standstill, but there is not the panic. And people are being, I think, as courteous as they can be, considering what the circumstances are. Brian?
NBC's Rahima Ellis at the foot of the 59th Street Bridge on the east side of Manhattan tonight. Will be coming back to you. And such an important point that the emergency kits that were urged on all Americans by the Department of Homeland Security that came out of the tragedy of 9/11 proving tonight to come in handy as we cover this colossal power outage that stretches from the furthest reaches of the East Coast all the way west to Cleveland, Ohio, and all the way north to Ottawa, Canada, and beyond. You'll notice Hartford, Connecticut, much of the state of Connecticut, totally in the dark, at least the interior spaces. That would include Union Station in New Haven. That is where Annie Rourke is from our NBC station WVIT there. Annie, what's the situation in New Haven at this hour?
Well, Brian, is much the same story here in Connecticut as you see in other areas. 182,000 people are without power right now. For the most part, those are people that are closer to New York in Fairfield County in the southwest section of Connecticut. But we have had reports of people having problems all the way up into Hartford. People along the shoreline took a very big power hit. The power went down, then came back up again, went down again, and then came back up. And for the most part, at this point, it is staying steady right there. Now, here at Union Station, the trains are not moving at all. It is at a complete standstill, and that is a real problem for Connecticut because hundreds of thousands of commuters go in and out of New York every day, and we're told there are thousands of people that are stranded in trains on the tracks right now. Now, what they are doing is actually taking diesel train equipment from another rail line, Shoreline East, and shipping that down closer to Metro North, closer to New York to try and fix those trains, get those people off the trains, get them to a station where they can get some help. Now, a lot of people are stranded here at Union Station. We've seen people with their luggage just dragging their luggage along the streets looking for hotels. Obviously, the taxis are doing a great service and the buses are just packed, but unfortunately, they are not going down into New York at all. Another problem that we're seeing is cell phone usage. A lot of people are trying to use their cell phones and they've just been busy. They're really not working at all. But we are seeing some of that famous American ingenuity when people are faced with adversity. People are getting together. They're finding people who are going to their same destination, and they're carpooling together. They are renting cars to try and get to where they need to go tonight. The mood here, really not too bad. People are trying to keep their sense of humor. They are starting to get a little frustrated, but they know that they just have to settle in for a long night until we hear some information. Brian?
Annie Rourke of WVIT. She is in New Haven for us tonight. We're looking at live pictures of what continues to be the human exodus off of the island of Manhattan tonight. They are headed across the very hot 59th Street Bridge. That is the very same location where we just spoke with Rahema Ellis. And note the common thread in so much of our coverage tonight: what is old is new again. Suddenly ferry boats are back in vogue. Trains are running on diesel engines. It's going to occur to someone to invent paper mail to make up for email, till they realize that's been around for a good long time as well. Rahema Ellis, if you can still hear me, are you getting any stories out of the New York subway system? That, of course, has been the chief concern all day long. Thousands of people in long, dark tunnels with only the information from the PA, from the motorman of their trains. All right, apparently we've lost touch with Rahema Ellis, things being what they are in New York. How about correspondent Robert Bazell on the streets of the city? Robert, are you with us? Not yet. We'll continue to tell you what we know. Again, a vast network of some major East Coast industrial capitals totally knocked out just after 4 o'clock Eastern time this afternoon. And here in New York, we are coping with it with emergency generators, trying to get air to circulate and power to move through the wires that we have up and running. Detroit, Michigan, Toronto and Ottawa, Canada, Albany, New York, parts of the state of Connecticut, New Jersey, Akron, Ohio, to name some of the population centers hit by this. It is vast, it is history-making, all because we are told two of the great and combined venerable names in the state of New York history, the Mohawk Niagara power system was the first to go down. When it went down, the rest of the systems went out in short order, almost like a game of electronic dominoes. When one went, it did so with enough force, and the system is just old enough and carrying a modern-day load that was the chain reaction. Ashley Banfield remains outside the Today Show studios on the Plaza at Rockefeller Center in the center of this city. And Ashley, are you hearing any stories of people who have come out having either been trapped in elevators, subway cars, and the like?
A woman who actually walked down 60 floors just to get out of her building, not wanting to attempt the elevator. And we're hearing a lot of stories of people who've done that. We've not heard of anybody who was trapped in an elevator, but we've heard of people who heard people were trapped in elevators. It's very hard to know at this time. But what I do want to tell you, Brian, is that with all of the lights out in Times Square and throughout this city, there's a grave concern for a lot of the the managers and the store owners in that area that they'll be looting later on. And so they're boarding up a lot of their stores and closing their stores and trying to protect against what might happen in another hour and a half when night falls throughout New York City. Also, a helicopter has been hovering over Times Square. It was too high for us to see whether it was NYPD or military, National Guard. We weren't sure, but clearly they were keeping a very close eye on the throngs, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who were not only overflowing the sidewalks, but clogging the streets as well. Traffic police in Times Square were trying to just clear the people out of the streets so that cars, ambulances, and police cars could actually get through. It was quite a mob scene, but you know, the surprising thing, most people taking it in stride, Brian, very different scene than 9/11. Not the panic, not the fear, lots of confusion, but clearly most people just annoyed more than anything else. Brian?
Ashley Banfield from the Today Show Plaza, and perhaps we should go back to and help to explain that live picture and dwell for just a moment on how it is we are somehow getting a live picture from the 59th Street Bridge without any power back to this building via microwave signal and then broadcasting it somehow across the country and around the world. Those are pedestrians, people who spent today in the city of New York, streaming out of the city. And we hasten to add, this is just one of so many bridges. There are ferries running at full bore capacity and then some. Only trains that have an exterior power source or are diesel powered are able to take commuters out of the city at this hour. Ashley raised an important issue, and that is the arrival of nightfall in not too long now. The Reuters news agency is reporting the following at this hour. New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg says he expects the city to be back to business Friday after experiencing one of the most widespread power outages in decades. Quote, the mayor here, I would expect everything to be back in business tomorrow, he said at a news conference. He said power failed across much of the region after 4 o'clock. Bloomberg cautioned, I don't want anyone to think the power is going to be back for everybody in the next hour. It is not going to be. The mayor earlier had assurances that it's coming back west to east, but we have no indications that there is any proof to that. We have remained in touch with both our NBC stations and reporting positions from, as we mentioned, about as far west as Cleveland, Ohio, up north to Ottawa. And what really should be stressed, these overhead pictures of the exodus out of this city bring back only one very vivid memory, and that is of 9/11. There is a huge difference here that cannot be repeated enough. This is the result, according to officials at the federal, state, and local level, of natural causes. This was a domino effect of a failed power grid, apparently, that took others down with it. And there is no indication that anyone did anything to cause the power to go out across this huge area of several hundred miles. The president was notified of this while on the ground in California at the Miramar military base, and immediately dispatched his aides to fan out by phone to all the state and municipal people who may need help. NBC News correspondent Campbell Brown is with us and can tell us about the President's Day. Campbell?
Well, Brian, as you said, he was here at Miramar speaking to troops and their families. Shortly after that, he was having lunch with some of the troops, which was about the time the blackouts occurred. Now, he has been fully briefed, we're told, by Homeland Security Director Tom Ridge. His chief of staff, Andy Card, did make a phone call to Mayor Bloomberg and offered him whatever assistance may be necessary in terms of federal help. And as you mentioned, the federal agencies in Washington have been instructed to reach out to their local counterparts, the FAA, Homeland Security, to make sure that they are getting whatever federal assistance they may need. White House officials also, as you mentioned earlier, have been quick to point out that there is no evidence whatsoever linking this to terrorism. They were very careful to say that early on. What they are deciding now, Brian, is the president is at a hotel actually just near where he is scheduled to give a fundraiser later tonight in San Diego. He is getting updates, continuous briefings while there. The communications team, some of whom are traveling with the president, are also meeting and trying to decide whether or not he may make remarks prior to that fundraiser, or whether or not we may hear from a spokesman and the president then addressing it later tonight at his fundraiser. There are no plans to call that off, though, and we should also say that at this point there are no plans for the president to return to the East Coast. Brian?
All right, Campbell Brown reporting from that military base in California as this becomes the second president from Texas in the modern era to have to deal with a colossal East Coast power failure centered in the population center that is the city of New York. Again, very early for reports on any deaths or injuries that are tangentially connected to this outage. But so far, the pictures speak for themselves. The orderly progression home by the commuters in New York who had a little change in plans and are dealing with it the very best they can by getting along and going along tonight. That means across the 59th Street Bridge. In just a moment, we're going to pause in our coverage to allow other NBC stations along the line to join us. This is a special edition of NBC Nightly News.
Good evening and welcome to Channel 4 News at 6. Demetria has the night off. I'm Terry Merriman.
Well, as you've been seeing, massive rolling power outages are leaving